You are a loser, but you do not know it. Defeat is your portion, but you are not aware. Even at the polls where you think you have so much power, you think you have freedom, you're as deceived as it gets. You think you have leeway, don't you? You think you have leverage. You think you still have options, more than a few moves left. Hear the word of the Lord. You have nothing of the sort. You're a rat in a trap. You're drowning. You're a slave in chains, a captive on a timer. Soon, the bomb will go off. Boom. Explosive changes. New world order. A female White House. A nation celebrating, but right behind it, waiting in the wings, out of sight. A grief. A loss. America, you will wail because of my judgments to you, because of all that I will do for your sin. Hear the Lord. I have not yet begun. I have not even started yet. This is the word of the Lord. And so this prophecy, just looking at the title that the Lord gave, Light, Camera, Action. Lights, Camera, Action. Everybody knows that this is the cue for a Hollywood production to kick off. When they say, all right, actors in place, everybody's ready, on your mark, cameras, lights, camera, action. That's when the scene starts rolling. That's when you can see a woman going, Jeffrey, how could you do this to me? And he's like, I've had enough. Nobody's actually feeling the emotions that they show you in a scene. Nobody's actually the people that they show you in a scene. There's no involvement. The man who the woman calls Jeffrey is not called Jeffrey. And Jeffrey hasn't had enough of anything, because as soon as he's done making this movie, Jeffrey might go home to his real partner and his real life. Lights, camera, action is a kickoff phrase to say, everything's in place. We've checked all the marks. We've checked all the players. We've checked everything that's required. We are now ready to go live. Lights, camera, action even happens for TV shows. Lights, camera, action happens for the news. They tell them counting down, and they start. Lights, camera, action is just a well-known, well-understood American phrase to say, we're going from a time of rest. We're going from a time of pause. We're going from a time where we were all in the huddle and deciding, how do we want to do this? This is the scene where we're going to portray this. This is the 11 o'clock news. It's 10:58. We're about to go live. Lights, camera, action means we're going from a resting phase into an active phase. And God is telling the United States of America that even though this year has been pretty tumultuous, you've been seeing the kinds of natural disasters that we've been having. We've been having those things since the beginning of the year. We've had, I think, a chemical spill this year that took place, that big chemical spill that took place. I don't know how those people are doing. We've had the aurora prophecies that fulfilled earlier in the year, a few months ago, and the aurora prophecies have fulfilled again. And I'm here to remind you, because this is as good a place to do it as any, that when you see the auroras keep coming back, remember that the original first aurora prophecy stated that the aurora will be a sign that we are moving into a time where we will what? We will begin to experience extreme and open and visible interaction with the fallen ones, fallen beings, UFOs, aliens, Nephilim creatures. And now we can see that just recently, I think it was just on the 13th, a day or two ago, there's this huge commotion going on in DC. But people saw it even as far away as North Carolina. People were reporting at different parts of the country what looked like crashes from the sky. Massive police response, lots of police on the ground, people recording them, people uploading this stuff at about 2 or 3 a.m. And even I saw quite a few videos with people saying, did anyone else see what was in the sky? People are starting to see a lot of light formations in the sky and things like that. And I've always told you here, since God kind of nudged me by force into those prophecies in 2021, telling me they need to know, tell them. I have always told you that as we go into the end times, these creatures will become quite bold, and they're not waiting for the government to show them, because the government is dragging its feet and it doesn't want to confess. that they are aliens, that they've been dealing with these aliens since the 40s and things like that. And so I said that the creatures will become quite bold and they will start showing themselves. And God says that the time when we should be aware that our lives will contain more and more and more of them is when we start to see auroras. So the Master's Voice prophecies are coming to a very nice and neat convergence point, exactly as I told you. And you're not hearing them from me, you're seeing them on the news for yourself. Lights, camera, action means that we're going from a resting phase into an active phase, but you can already see that we're starting to get into an active phase and kind of stay active. We're kind of staying active now. And so God is saying here that there's a war coming to America, and this civil war has been prophesied many, many, many times. God says it's going to be more brutal than the first civil war that we have, and it's going to burn up, he says, counties and states of America in an all-out war between the government and the citizens. You have heard here many times that the U.S. government is going to go absolutely rogue, and I was sharing just recently in one of the messages that I brought here, the last two, I think I'm wearing a black shirt and purple, and I said the US government is never going to go from 0 to DEFCON 12 and suddenly say we're a dictatorship, we're coming out and we're confessing what we are. They're never going to do that. They're going to try and soft foot it, and the way they're going to do it, they're going to eat at the existing systems of laws. God says that when Kamala Harris comes into power, she's going to update the Rolodex, and quite a few people were mocking me on social media and says, I can tell this prophecy is a lie because who uses a Rolodex? And I was just sitting there and thinking, Lord, a Rolodex is an archaic system of keeping contacts and information intact. In the same way, the laws of America have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. So obviously you're not going to call it a flash drive. It makes more sense to call it a Rolodex. How poor in understanding these people are. Even that was something that they said was funny, and that's what means the prophecy isn't true. But there's going to come a dichotomy between the government and the people, because the government is going to become more and more and more and more controlling, more and more repressive, more and more not good at hiding the repression. Because I said that we're going to end up in a North Korea style, China style kind of nation. You've been hearing that here for years. And Americans are very much enamored of their freedom. They're very much enamored of, I have my free will. No one should compel me. No one should tell me to this. That's not American. That's not the American way. We have laws. When the laws start getting abrogated by the government is going to justify its abrogation of the laws through needs. They're going to base it on needs. All that happened in 2020, the whole COVID, everything that happened in 2021, it was told to us on a needs basis. No, we're keeping you in the house because it's the best way to stop the spread. It's on a needs basis. Oh no, we're giving this thing because we've talked to the two big arm candy makers, and this is a needs basis. America, we need this to get back to normal. So normal was sold as something that we need, and because people were so afraid and people were so precarious in their understanding of the bigger picture of the fact that there is a beast system that has to establish itself, that has to rule, that has to reign, they listened to the needs-based regulations and policies, many of them flying in the face of what we would normally do, and they followed it. So this thing, when it comes again, God says it's going to cause huge conflict that will eventually erupt in a war between the American people and the government. And if you watch the prophecy that's entitled 2 More Good Years, you can actually hear God saying in that prophecy that when it comes to the end of the 2 good years, then he starts saying that war is coming. Not the possibility of war, the specter is war. Then he starts saying 2 more good years, America, and then war. 2 more good years, America, and then war. So we are now rounding out the end of the 2nd good year, which has already been explained, doesn't mean great year, fun year you enjoy. It means a time period where you can actually access what you want, even if you have a bit more struggle, even if you have to have 2 jobs. We are going into a future where to even have 1 job, it will be next to impossible. We're going into crashed money, a future of crashed money. We're going into a future of a collapsed economy. We're going into a future of complete devaluation of the US dollar and the collapse of many currencies, the collapse of many nations pinned to America's economy and things like that. And so this war has already been prophesied that it would be part of what God basically called America's war years. If you're new, the prophecy for America is that America is going to have 3 years of civil war, nothing less than that. But recently, because America kept disrespecting God, even though he had said that the prophecy would be a minimum of 3 years, but it could go longer unless people pray. Instead of praying, people laughed and mocked and said the word was crazy and the messenger was off her medication. Therefore, this year, the Lord brought a prophecy that said that the war years of America are going to be greatly expanded. So it's 3 minimum, and then for sure, it's going to be more than 3. So Yah says that because of rising tensions between the American people and their government, this war is a soon coming thing. And then he says, it's been a long time where people who are out of sync with their government actually stood up for their freedom against the tyranny of a government. And it's true. Ever since America's Civil War, where the different states were opposed on the question of slavery and what actually was necessary for the American economy, can you take human beings and use them as product and use them as items as that you list in the economy, like cotton and like boats and like wheat and barley and things like that? Ever since then, even though Americans have had moments where they butt head with their government, God says it's very rare in the modern world where you will see people standing up against tyranny, against their government, and actively fighting like that, and actively coming against their government to the point of bearing arms to go to war, especially in modern nation. That happens next to never. Maybe people can get upset and burn a few things like they've been doing in Paris and other parts of Europe, but an outright civil war in a so-called first world nation, God says, long has it been, meaning that he's talking back to the times when Europe was cutting off kings' heads and everything, and that was when they were fighting their wars and establishing themselves as war people, settling their nations as who do we want to rule, whose head is getting cut off. But ever since we've come into times of modernity, you don't see that. God says, so long has it been where you actually see the people stand up for their freedom against the tyranny of government. But he says also, few are the times where the people succeed. So if you look in some parts of Southeast Asia and you look in Africa, definitely there, when those people have coups, they don't have coups with placards. They have coups with actually soldiers rolling up in the mansion of the president and executing him on live TV, speaking in their language, and then shoot him on camera or kill him or drag him in the streets, the body in the streets behind the car. They don't play when they have coups in Thailand, in Zimbabwe, when they have coups in Sierra Leone and the Congo and Liberia and places like that. They come to make themselves known that we're having a coup, we're tired of you, and you have to go. Even I think Mauritania and Niger had coups this year, and people were worried actually that it would spread like contagion, because in certain localities, when people are tired of the leaders, they don't play games. They wake up and it's by all means. It's by all means we're settling this today. So God says, few are the times where you can actually see people succeeding in removing their government. And the reason for that is because he says, all factors now favor governments. Governments now control main transport highways and byways. They control all the ports. They're the ones who maintain and build roads. If a government decides it's not going to develop a certain province, doesn't build roads to the provinces, doesn't give clinics, doesn't give schools, doesn't build wells, doesn't put any of the amenities there, doesn't put up the light poles that you need for electricity, doesn't lay down the fiber optic cable, that part of the country within a nation can be like it's from the 1800s. It will be as if it's stuck in the past, because the government is the one holding all that power. And God says that now when you see the government controlling food, transport, electricity, where water is pumped, and even the hospitals, even if hospitals are private, when government makes a decree, when government makes a rule, private hospitals will follow. Not every hospital in America is a public hospital, but when the government made decrees concerning COVID, every single institution fell in line. And that is the way it is. And also aviation, even if you have private air companies, they all operate in the larger public policy space that the government rules over. And so God says, as a result, you see that power is securely with the leaders of the modern world, not with the people. He says, unless there is a distinct and a convinced force that comes against the government, they will never be removed from their position of power. That is a civil war. And to have a civil war, you literally have to be convinced that you are sick of the situation. It's not just, oh, this isn't working for us, or oh, this is uncomfortable, this is against my law, this is against my rights. No, no, no. To have a civil war, the people of the nation en masse, or enough of them, have to find the living conditions absolutely intolerable, not only to their mental, not only mentally, oh,